Retire earlier than planned. It happens to more people than you might think. Today, we want to help you get ready to retire. Hi, I'm Molly Nelson here with Sean Honkamp and Lauren Merkel. They're both certified financial fiduciaries and certified financial planners. Sean is also a CPA. Today, we are diving into a study. Here's the name of the study, Mass Mutual Retirement Happiness Study. And here's what it says. Many retirees retired earlier than planned. 63 was their ideal age and 62 was their actual age. The study also found that nearly half of retirees say they retired earlier than planned. Sean, this tracks with what's happening with a lot of the families and individuals that you meet with.
Yeah, we have lots of conversations when we first meet people, and a lot of people, they have these targets out there, and we often see maybe where it's a little arbitrary, that maybe people are just feeling like, hey, I can only do this for 2 more years, or they link it to maybe a Social Security age of some sort. So they've got these marks out in front of them, but then with our experience, we see that as we're helping you develop that plan, you have more clarity. Now we can be a little more, help you be a little more defined about those exact retirement dates. And then now as you have that overall plan, people are in a position where oftentimes they can retire with confidence sooner than what they had planned.
And Lauren, the study looked at why. It looked at why 48% of retirees say they retired earlier than planned. Here's why. 33% say there were changes at work, and 28% say they were able to afford it. 25% say illness or injury, and 25% say more free time to relax. And then there's a percentage also that we're looking at burnout as a reason to retire early.
Yeah, and I also thought it was interesting, only 10% retired later than they anticipated. So nearly half retiring sooner, only 10% later. And one other number I thought was really interesting was 28% that retired earlier because they could afford it. And I thought that was, is it a coincidence? I'll ask you guys, is it a coincidence?
All right.
Because Charles Schwab also recently conducted a study that said only 33% of people have a written retirement plan. So when I saw 28% saying they retired early because they could afford it, 33% have a written plan. And based on our real experience, we see that all the time. People come into us and they say they want to retire at 65 and 63, but then we write the plan and we show them actually they can retire at 64 and 62. And then we pose the question, do you want to retire earlier or do you want to continue on with your original plan? And many people then choose to retire earlier because why wouldn't you? You basically get the gift of time. And time, we all know, is the most precious asset. It's the one thing we don't know how much we have of. And if you can recapture some of that time that maybe you otherwise wouldn't have been able to if you had to work longer, what an incredible gift. And by the way, what a name to a study. Whoever created that, the Mass Mutual Retirement Happiness Study, that's a great name to a study.
Yeah, and we should mention the happiness part of this because they say, and I've read lots of studies on this, the happiest retirees are those that have not only a financial plan, but a plan for their health, their wellness, and their lifestyle as well. So that's something I know you guys talk about a lot and we talk about on this show as well. But let's get back to those who retire early, because you may be wondering, how do they do it? How did they retire earlier than planned? Well, Sean has got a great example. And what he has, and he's going to talk about right now, is a couple that he worked with. We're going to change their names and some of the specific details because we want to protect their privacy. But the basics of this story really should outline for people, Sean, how you can retire earlier than planned with a plan.
Yeah, this is a great real life example that we're in the middle of right now. So we're going to call them Mike and Diane. So Mike and Diane, we started first working with them in 2019. So we're going on 5+ years. And kind of like we said before, they had these arbitrary ages out there of when they wanted to retire. Mike wanted to retire at the age of 64, and Diane was planning to retire at the age of 62. We've started working with them, obviously get together a few times every year. We're helping them develop their plan and start to give them more insight into what those years are going, what they're looking like and what their plans is looking like. So we continue to help them develop that plan. And now as time has gone by, right now, Mike retired a few months ago, and he was right at 64. So it was a few months sooner than what his target was, but still similar to his age. And we had been working with them to develop that plan, make sure they feel really confident with what they're doing. And then since Mike's retirement, we had another visit, and they surprised me a little bit with Diane saying that, hey, she had made that decision to retire at the age of 60, which is in a few months from now, about 2.5 years prior to than what her original date was. And the two biggest things they shared is part of what you should be looking for. kind of like Lauren touched on, they felt extremely confident that they can afford it. They knew they were ready to be able to do it and continue to achieve their retirement goals. And the other biggest thing was they just want to spend time together. Now at the ages of 64 and 60, they're looking forward to being together and enjoying these years right now.
Okay, so how does it work? So you originally met with them, they said 64, 62, you draw up a plan and show them, okay, boom, here's how it's gonna work. So she walks in and says, you know what guys, instead, I wanna retire at 60. Do you re-crunch the numbers right at that moment to show her that she can retire, or what do you do?
There wasn't a need to re-crunch it, because every time we're getting together as we're building these plans are live. So every time as years go by, as 6 months go by, another year goes by, the plan is current. Now it's reflecting what we know, what the tax rates are. We know what the markets have done. So now we know what their investment balances are. So every time we get together and look at their plan, whether it's through a phone call or in person with them, they're getting a better sense of reality and now knowing what that looks like. So they were able to make that decision based on what we have been experiencing for those several years that we've been working together.
So through those different iterations of the plan, I'm sure there was conversation along the way of, hey, Sean, what happens if I don't work until 64? What happens if I don't work until 62? Is that possible? Does that work? What does the income look like? Where am I going to get that income from? What else can we do from a tax plan? All those conversations are a part of that. So it's really not a surprise. And what happens with that planning process is you turn insecurity into security. You turn indecision into decision, not having confidence, a lack of confidence into confidence, and that's what really enables somebody to make such a decision like retiring much younger than what they originally anticipated.
And I think the key too is they started working with the retirement planners here at Merkle Retirement Planning 5 years prior to this. So you had some time to look at the plan on a lot of different levels. And there were some action steps that I think if we share with the viewers today, that if you hear these, there's the kind of things they can be thinking about doing as well if they'd like to retire earlier.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things we did was that everybody always has an opportunity to be making investment decisions and designing their portfolio. Part of what we did, some really big action steps with Mike and Diane, is that we brought in new diversification into their investment portfolio. While we're all young and accumulating and saving, we're all used to having all that money in the markets at risk, and it's doing this every day, every month, every year. And we had the opportunity to bring in some different alternative strategies. Now they had part of their portfolio that was safety. So then no matter what kind of market cycle we go through, they're feeling confident that some of their portfolio is adding value to their plan and helping them get them in a better position. Another thing that they did is they took an opportunity of different lunch and learns that our team does. So during this 5+ years that we've been working with them, they've continued to get the information they needed. At some stage of life, concern 5 can be down there. Maybe it's not something that you're going to spend time on. But then a year later, all of a sudden concern 5 is number 1 or 2. And with the lunch and learns and different workshops that our team does, we're continuing to provide information and education to the families we work with. They don't just rely on maybe the once a year visit or a few times a year, depending on that stage of life. They're taking opportunity to continue to get information throughout the time frame, as part of that relationship that we have with them.
Yeah, that's a great point. We hold lunch and learns on things like Medicare and tax planning and market updates. So people get more and more information that can help them even change their plan, obviously, when to retire.
Yeah.
One last thing they did as well was they did look at their debt situation.
Yeah, that was a big part. I know Mike was a little more focused on this because I think he was retiring sooner. He has been retired now for a few months. This was really important for him that they had these debts out there and they wanted to get them taken care of. That's just the goal they had. So this was important to them. And then obviously if we're taking care of debts, your cash flow is going to feel a little stronger. So now maybe we don't need $8,000 a month, maybe you only need $7,000 a month because some of those required payments are gone. So that was a very intentional part of the last year, the experience that we've had together is that we were identifying when and where we could take some lump sum distributions to pay off specific debts so that they were achieving these goals. And it's fun just to see that you are the one that gets to identify the goals. I might look at, and I remember one of them only being like a $30,000 debt, nothing material, right? It's not a $200,000 mortgage. But yet it was very important to them to take care of that. So we wanted to make sure we did do that. So that was very important to them. It's fun just to have those conversations and help work with a couple to make those decisions in the best way possible.
And I think right there highlights the importance of having the comprehensive plan. So many times people think about retiring and they think about one facet of their plan, which is income. And they tie their retirement date, they tie their retirement time frame to that particular facet of the plan. But just like in this case, they wanted to make sure they had enough income, but they also needed to work on the debt so they had more disposal, more discretionary income, which also increases the confidence in so many other facets of the plan. And that's why there has to be a comprehensive plan, not just focused just on the income.
So let's talk about action steps. Action step number one, Lauren, find out where you stand.
Find out where you stand. So if you choose to retire early or on time or late, or you have to retire, you know what that is going to look like. This is something that you've never done before, and you want to make sure you get it right because we're talking about the rest of your life. This could be 20 to 25 years where you don't have an income coming from employment, so you have to deliver the income from the investments in Social Security and pension if you have it. So you have to make sure you get it right. You want to have confidence. And going back to that study, the title of that study, happiness is at the center of that title. You want happiness to be at the center of the rest of your life because now you have more time than you've ever had before. That freedom of time is so important. You want to take advantage of it with as much happiness as you can. So make sure that you're ready with that plan.
And I'm not sure how I'm going to transition this, but I'm going to do my best. Part of that happiness is calculating your retirement tax bill.
That's good.
that makes, I know, the CPA in the room happy.
Yeah, let's go. There's a lot of happiness to be had when it comes to taxes because our goal is to help you pay less in taxes throughout your retirement journey. But you can't ignore taxes. You want to have a snapshot of where you are. So when you've got a $500,000 balance in an IRA, you don't get to keep that entire $500,000. In fact, you don't know how much of that you will get to keep and spend because tax rates change over time. That's where it's important to have tax diversification and have that overall tax bill and have a sense of, well, what might you pay in total taxes over maybe the first 10 years of retirement or over a 20 or 30 year retirement journey. So you've got a lifestyle you want to live that requires distributions. We've got to understand what the tax implications are. That's part of what having that comprehensive plan can do. We're aware of the tax rates that are in place today. We know what potential tax legislative changes are in front of us, and that we have all that information so that we can start making the best tax decisions each and every year to help people save on their total tax bill over time.
Yeah, it's worth noting that's something you help people do. Calculate that retirement tax bill and then make changes if needed or if they can. Another action step when we're talking about retiring early is maximize Social Security.
Social Security, you have up to 81 different options, and it can represent anywhere between 25 to 30% of your lifetime income. In the Online Journey to Retirement workshop, we walk John and Sue through their 81 different options, and we save them, or actually they get about $92,000 over the course of their retirement more based on the decisions that they made with Social Security. That's what you want to do when it comes to optimizing your Social Security. And with so many decisions, we need to first evaluate, here's your starting point, here's the number of options at your starting point, here's some of the other options that you can choose. And then once you have that information, it is much easier for you to decide with confidence this is the right Social Security decision for you.
Yeah, another action step is that investment strategy. That's exactly what we did with Mike and Diane. They came in 5 years before retirement and you had a time to make changes in their investments.
An important thing to think about when it comes to making investment decisions and designing your portfolio is that at this stage of life, there are other strategies that you want to be aware of and that are appropriate to be considering. We know when we're younger, we've got time on our side. Most of us have a high risk appetite. The volatility doesn't concern you. But now when you're within those first few years of retirement, and even more importantly, in those first few years of retirement, what the markets do can have a real big impact on what that long-term plan looks like. So we're going to try to help you be more transparent about the investment decisions. We're going to give you more information around what you need to be considering. And just like you talked about with Mike and Diane, when we first met them, all their money in the markets at risk, going up and down, that worked. But over the course of the 5 years that we've been working with them, now we've got some new strategies. They've got some money that is safe and guaranteed. So now it still has a chance to grow in the markets, but won't go down. They've seen some market volatility in these recent years. 2022 was a really tough, challenging down market year. And then we've had some strong market years since then. So Mike and Diane are feeling really good about that overall design and the different strategies that they have within their portfolio.
And the biggest thing you did for Mike and Diane, and what we do for John and Sue, the hypothetical couple in the workshop, is develop a retirement income plan. And that's really what I think gives them and gives a lot of people the confidence to retire.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the biggest takeaways of this whole show is let's make sure that you have an income plan. Let's make sure that you have a comprehensive retirement plan to make sure that you are making the best decisions you can along all of these lines. And point number two is it's really tempting sometimes to say, I'm not going to retire for 5 years, so I'm not going to worry about the plan for 4 or 5 years. Start now, because sometimes you do have to retire when you don't want to. Sometimes you want to retire earlier than what you originally thought. And there's strategies that you can implement right now that can really boost your overall retirement, even if you do retire on target date or beyond. And that's what we show in the Online Journey to Retirement Workshop with John and Sue. They have specific retirement dates, but in their plan, we show you they could retire earlier if they wanted to, or they could retire on time. And then the specific strategies they use along the entire plan through the income, the taxes, the healthcare, the investments, and the legacy plan.
This is Retiring Today, and we thank you for watching.
Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, click here for more great content from our team. Don't forget to subscribe to continue to receive helpful information for your retirement planning.